Hey, Dave Ruther here, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about remarkability and why it's so important, especially when creating content online in an environment where everybody's spouting all sorts of crap about pretty much everything, and the majority of people are trying to get away from information. How do you stand out in the noise, in that noise? And the answer is remarkability, to create remarkable content. So what do I mean by remarkable content? Well, essentially, remarkable essentially means this, right? It's remarked upon. So people talk about it. It's worth talking about. It's worth remarking upon. And therefore, you need to consider when you create new content how you're making it remarkable, how you're making it worthy of being spoken about. And there's lots of different ways to approach this. There may be something specific to your business that just happens to be remarkable. But I like to try and find frameworks that apply to everything so that, when it comes, it basically makes life easy for you, So that when you're in a kind of right brain creative workflow, you don't need to think too hard and you can just apply these principles. So there's a few things which I think about when it comes to creating remarkable content. When it comes to a point that you need to create something, but maybe you're struggling, then you can fall back to these 2 points, and these are just 2 points worth considering. You may find more. If you've got more, it'd be great to hear them in the comments below. If you come across them for your own business, there may be other things as well. So this isn't like hard and fast, but these are really great places to start to look when it comes to creating remarkable content, remarkable products, remarkable anything whatsoever, right? So the first thing is what already. So basically what I mean by this is, what are people already remarking upon? What's already being spoken about in the press? So, a great, or not even the press, anywhere online, a really great place to look for this is places like Twitter. So Twitter is a place where people just stream their consciousness 24/7. Literally, there are people who tweet like 10, 15 times a day. I believe the President of the United States there is one of those people. There's lots of people who just sit and stream their consciousness online the whole time. And they talk about remarkable things that are being remarked upon. And you start to find, even with stuff like trending hashtags, etc., it's a really good place to find out what's actually going on the day. So you can then combine, this is probably a concept you've come across already, like combine your say, or your business or your product with stuff that's already trending, stuff that's going on in the press. That's one way of doing it. There's a really good example of this, okay? So is a good friend of mine, Anne M. Hobson. So she is a foodie, a fellow foodie, and she's specifically very much into cheese. She's got a whole blog about cheese, and she was looking on Twitter about what was being spoken about time and time again, and this trend kept on coming up, and it's kind of subversively, you'd have to be looking for cheese conversations to see this, but Twitter's got like a ridiculously advanced search function, like a graph search they call it, where you can type in keywords and play around a little bit and start to find trends and stuff that people are constantly talking about. And I found that people have been speaking about a cheese advent calendar for years, but nobody had actually made one. So she, in a similar sense to me with my business, Cheese Posties, created a concept, like literally a cardboard cutout on her kitchen table, created this thing, put it online, and within a few days went globally viral. Or maybe it wasn't that fast, but pretty damn soon went globally viral. The following year did the same again. The following year was accepted. In fact, the following year was accepted into a national supermarket, and the following year after that, multinational supermarkets. So really, really powerful stuff, just looking at what's already been spoken about, what's already being remarked upon in the online sphere. And that for you might look different to Twitter. It might look different to a cheese advent calendar. It probably does, in fact. But there's always places that your audience is streaming their consciousness. There's always places where your audience is talking about what's important to them, talking about what's remarkable to them. So that's stage one when it comes to actually finding how to create remarkable content. Get creative with it and enjoy yourself. The second stage of this is combining concepts. So within these ideas, there are probably multiple concepts that are being spoken about that could be combined. And this is, again, I'm talking a lot about food today and a lot about cheese, but again, this is exactly how we came up with our idea for Cheese Posties, which went globally viral within a week, just to demonstrate again how powerful this stuff is. So we combine the concepts which were being spoken about, which are already trending online, which are already trending within the conversations and the publications that are specific demographic of customers were residing, and this is so we combine the concepts of melting cheese in terms of food. So we knew we wanted to do a food product. So melting cheese was the big thing in terms of food. Every single post that went viral pretty much included either viral cheese, either melted cheese or meat. So we went with melted cheese. At the time, unusual combinations, which we'll get onto in another video as well. Unusual combinations, combining unusual ideas, drives conversation, drives people to talk, because everyone wants to talk, everyone wants to have their opinion heard, and therefore one person would like it, somebody else would not like it, they would talk, they drive the engagement, and that pushes you up in the algorithm, right? From a social media standpoint, it pushes you up in the algorithm. From a real life standpoint, more people talk about it. It's exactly the same concept, right? It mirrors itself in the real world. If people are talking about it, if people got opinions, they're more likely to talk about it. It drives the conversation. Other people chip in, and you start to create that virality. So, where was I? So, the first idea was melted cheese. The second idea was combining unusual combinations, and the third idea was subscription boxes, because subscription boxes were huge at the time. Dollar Shave Club had either just or was about to sell to, I think it was Gillette, for $1 billion. $1 billion, the subscription business, literally a few years out the gate. So they were being spoken about a lot in the press already. So these were hot topics on people's minds. Nobody combined them yet. I'm not entirely surprised, but nobody combined these things together yet. But everybody was talking about these three individual things. And combining these three things not only hit the three kind of points that people were already talking about, but also created something remarkable as well. So remarkability is one of those things that, like, is from an immediate standpoint is quite elusive. Like, how do you create stuff that people want to talk about? It's kind of like a holy grail question, right? But then if you start to use questions like this, then it can guide you in the right direction. And you know, the best creative ideas that I ever have are talking to other people. You know, when you start to talk to other people and drive conversation and talk about ideas, then eventually ideas come up that you wouldn't have thought about on your own. It's just the nature of how we work as human beings. You know, somebody else's idea affects yours, affects theirs, and you knock ideas around. The whole concept that like two or plus minds are greater together than their sum value. You're going to get a lot more value than just the power of two individual minds by sitting and talking about stuff. Now, specifically, you know, a lot of the time, when I come up with viral ideas or any ideas whatsoever that have been successful, then it's post conversation as well. So don't necessarily feel like, you know, by sitting down and having a team meeting or a creative conversation that you're necessarily going to come out the end of that with your next multi-billion-dollar business idea. What you get there is a kind of meshing of ideas, and then as you go away and think and talk about it, think about it in your own mind, then it's gonna start to trigger other things in your subconscious as well. There's a guy who talks about this guy called Eugene Schwartz, who he's a copywriter. Let me see if I can find his book. I can't see that right now, but so this guy's an absolute genius, right? He's one of those guys from the 20th century, like a huge copywriter from the 20th century, who is doing direct response copy for huge companies. Copywriting is in like writing the words in their adverts, right? So it's a very creative process and coming up with stuff which is remarkable, and he was an absolute master of it. Incidentally, that book I was telling you about is very difficult to get hold of. It's a book about this thick, and it cost me about $600, the book itself, but it's worth every cent because it's very, very powerful. Within this book, Eugene talks about how he approaches copyright and how he approaches creating messages, remarkable messages that stick with people and that influence people and convince them that a product is worthwhile purchasing, right? And the way he approaches this is that he'll sit down in 15 to 20 minute chunks. If you imagine this is your time with your meeting, with your people, with your creative team, whatever, sit down in 15 to 20, I think it's actually 30-minute chunks, and he'll sit down and he can do nothing else but write. Whether he writes or not doesn't matter, but he's not going to let himself do anything else but write. So he sits and he thinks, and if he writes, he writes. If he doesn't, he doesn't. After that 30 minutes is up, he goes away and he does mundane tasks, whether it be doing the dishes, washing the car. I don't know what someone like Eugene Schwartz, like a high-level copywriter living in New York City, what he would necessarily do in terms of a mundane task. But regardless, he gets away from his desk and he goes and he spends some time just switching off his frontal lobe, right? So whichever part of your brain handles kind of consciousness. I'm not a brain scientist by any means, but he switches off the conscious part of his brain, and then things start to bubble up, because you know the way our brains work is kind of like this. In case you hadn't guessed it already, that's the worst illustration of an iceberg that you've ever seen in your life, and that is the sea. That's photorealistic. And this is your conscious brain. And this is where all the really juicy stuff happens. This is your unconscious. I'm sure that's very readable. So this is the conscious brain. This is what you engage in when you're in that meeting with those other people. You're talking about ideas, you're bashing stuff together. It's fantastic. You're all sat there, a bunch of icebergs in a room, all talking about the ideas, all talking about the concepts that we're covering in these videos, and probably coming up with some pretty decent ideas, right? But then when you go away and you switch off this stops making so much noise, you put this whole thing on mute, then this can really come into action. This is where the real money shot happens. You see, you know, what I was saying in one of the previous videos about simplicity and how the human brain can only handle a certain amount of information at one time. You're only ever going to be able to deal with a certain amount of information. You're only ever going to be able to come up with a certain amount of ideas, because this part of your brain isn't capable of combining ideas like this one. This part of your brain isn't capable of creating creating creativity, creating, you know, unusual, remarkable things like this is. This part of the brain is so much more powerful, and unfortunately it's, well, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, it's not very easily accessible. But when you do switch this off, then things start to come up from here. When you go away and do mundane tasks, then stuff starts to happen here that you're not even aware of, and then ideas from those conversations come up to your conscious brain, and you start to have remarkable ideas. Now this has got a little bit deeper than I'd intended it to, if I'm completely honest with you, but this is really important. It's a really it's something which a lot of people don't take the time out to go and do, to step back and, you know, look at the bigger picture, and to try and have remarkable ideas about their business. Engaging this part of your mind is something which we, you know, all too often neglect to do as business owners, because we're so busy running freaking businesses, right? But it's so powerful. It's so there's so many ideas, so many things going on in this part of your brain which you can release just by going away and doing mundane tasks. But to feed that process, to have these conversations either with yourself, either by making notes, either by processing ideas, by talking to people, by talking to colleagues, other business owners, your creative team, or even me, then you know, you start to have these wonderful things that go on in the unconscious, which then will pop up into your conscious brain, and that's how you start to have really remarkable ideas. So hopefully that gives you some ideas about how to come up with remarkability for your advertising, and gives you some concept as to why it's important, why people don't share boring stuff, and therefore this is a really powerful thing to start to harness for your own business.